You know, to be fair, these jobs do more than just one thing. For example, the CAO I mentioned earlier was involved in 2 grants this past week from RIDE for some substantial dollars for the Corinne Tech Center. So I think to characterize them as all, you know, all the same, just, you know, passing on federal regs is probably unfair.
Okay, thank you. So, and then I see 2 other positions. The
coordinator of teaching applications and assessment is not in my department. That is in the curriculum department.
Okay.
That rolls out the teaching tools, if you will, for that.
We do SATs now, and we're also gearing up for the new science assessment. As you heard me mention earlier, science is now every day in grade 6. And we're looking at a ramp of science in the earlier grades.
For clarification, you said science is now grade 6?
Science next year is every day in grade 6. Right now, we teach science once a week. That's not okay. Next year, we actually fix that. What I'm telling you is, you mentioned tests coming down the road. There's a new required state assessment in science coming in grades, I think it's 5 is the first grade level. And we are transitioning to the governor for SATs. We have done that. Also PSAT, that's grade 6. Grade 3 in the budget, we have a program rolled out to teach science more than once a week using URI, a program called GEMSNet, and that's our rollout for next year. Because right now, once a week for science isn't going to cut it. What we're doing, though, is, like most districts, 3 teachers are certified to teach science in elementary school. So that's what we're modeling for grade 3 next year. The 8 science people who teach science, teachers and also probably L certified, those folks will bid elsewhere next year.
So the teachers, they're the ones who are, they're going
to work throughout the district. We have a number of feet on the ground on that. So there needs to be a supervisor that's traveling around.
Okay, what's an environmental coordinator, please?
They make sure that the buildings have the appropriate testing, the compliance paperwork done, air quality.
So they fall under the director of buildings and grounds? Okay. Question, Superintendent. How many buildings are you going to have operational for student learning in 2018-2019, please?
Next year we have 13 elementary schools.
Yep.
We have a preschool.
I'm sorry, say again?
We have a preschool.
All right.
We have 2 middle schools.
They've been at 3, possibly 4 schools. Next year they will each have 2. They will each have a social worker and a psychologist at each B.
So they are still splitting between schools?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So what would you say is the student to worker or counselor or psychologist ratio? Or do you have an, because I know, are we, Superintendent, are we still outsourcing our students to these, like, who need that assistance, that help? Caseload.
I think the staffing level next year is the best, the highest it's been ever in Warwick. I think we can always look at using more because of all the days, but next year, it's our best staffing level to date.
Thank you. Just a couple more. Thank you. Have you reached out? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Ferrucci.
I do have one comment on that. From my perspective, when we're going through this level of grilling as to what our needs are, I have to tell you, I'm not going to be popular when I say this, but psychologists and social workers were predicated on caseloads, the assessment. But I did go look at Cranston. Cranston has less for 1,000 more students than Warwick. So we will be looking at caseloads to have a better answer for you. And if we have that level of service that's needed, we'll be back here with evidence as to why we need to elevate. If we don't have that level of evidence, you may find something different, but we did look at it, but I couldn't get a clear picture for this year.
And please let me clarify, the reason why I asked this question is because if you look at the Parkland shooter, the police were called to the school 19 times. 32 times the student was referred. And one of the things that has come out from the investigations is the caseload. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying this is something I think that we are now have to reassess and reevaluate and look at. Thank you. Have you, Superintendent, Mr. Ferrucci, or anyone on the school committee, Have you reached out to the elected state officials about this funding formula? Have you officially reached out? Because coming into...
Superintendent's Association.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Council President, Council members, Councilman Howe, yes, I have personally reached out to several members of the state legislature, the reps and senators, as well as the Rhode Island Association of School Committees, which represents Warwick School Committee and our school committees, Tim Duffy up at the State House with regard to a fair funding formula. I also believe, 12 years on this committee, 30 years a parent in this district with my children all through the Warwick school system, I do not believe that the funding formula is fair. We can jump up and down and bang our table and yell and scream. It's not fair. 4 districts receive 75% of the funding: Providence, Pawtucket, Woonsocket, and Central Falls. So the remaining 38 districts share that remaining 25%. We now are not the second largest city in this state. We're the third. Hundreds of homes were taken through airport expansion. So we've lost the ability to generate tax revenue in Warwick. Apparently it's a sight unseen up at the State House. It's falling on blind eyes and deaf ears. I'm not sure what else that we can do. If there is something else that we can do, please tell me, and I'm happy to go up there and bang on doors up and down the State House and fight for this. I know Mr. Nadeau has also been very vocal about the state funding formula. Until and unless it changes, and until and unless those men and women up on Smith Hill open their eyes to it, we can woulda, coulda, shoulda it all day long. So I absolutely agree with you. If we were funded fairly, if we were funded appropriately, we would not have the somewhat antagonistic relationship between the city council and the school department. I don't believe that it's fair or warranted from either side, or I don't believe that's how we need to be. But we're the only two that we can fight with. So until and unless it changes on Smith Hill, I can wish until the cows come home, and my wishing won't get, and whatever else I need to do, I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. You just said what I was hoping you would say. Thank you. And I hope the audience hears that too. It's definitely something.
Yes, Karen.
Good evening. Hello? Is it on?
It is. Okay. You just have to talk close.
Good evening, Mr. President, and congratulations, council members and other dignitaries and elected officials in the chambers. I have talked to numerous reps and senators about this issue. We know that right next door to us, we have Massachusetts, that is one of the best run school systems in the country. And they have developed, first of all, they went and they made education in the state of Massachusetts a civil right. In Rhode Island, as I think most of you know, and I've asked them if they'd be interested in sitting down to discuss this further, because there have to be answers, and we have to do something practical and reasonable, because we can't count on our city residents. We don't have enough. We can't build enough in Warwick right now because we've lost so growing up. From the gambling at Highline is going to go toward education. To this day, not a dime of that money has gone to education. And that's a problem. The general fund is a huge problem in this state because everything comes out of there and nothing is allocated for what the needs are for things like education and health and things like that. And if they go run out of money there, then they choose who gets it or not. But we have to create a funding stream for education in this state that is fair and affordable. And we have to start holding people fired to their feet, saying, you said that this would come from gambling proceeds. Where's the money? Put it there. Make education a civil right. Let's move on. Let's do what's right for the citizens of Rhode Island. Look at some of the schools they've done over. They have done a marvelous job, and they had the funds to do it. Not to mention the funding formula for our give back, the housing aid money, we get 35%. A lot of these other communities get upwards of 80%. So there's a lot of inequity in education. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for the answer.
Mr. Howard, are you done with Councilman?
I am done with my questions, and I know that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Testa.
Thank you. Just to kind of echo what Karen said, and I'll go back to Massachusetts. When Massachusetts Supreme Court declared there was a public education was a civil right, that changed the whole. Okay, and I would just put to you, school committees have a lobbyist. We have Tim Duffy. The superintendents have a lobbyist. They always lobby for more state aid in the funding formula. The funding formula that came out for the last 10 years, asking for a change in the state constitution, declaring that public education is a civil right, and many, if not most other. But unless that happens, that forces the state to change how it funds education. To what Karen said, Massachusetts has 1% of the sales tax that goes right to schools for buildings and rehabs. Okay? And unless we can get a constitutional amendment, these conversations are more parlor conversations than anything else. Okay? Because you're not going to lobby. We're not going to go to Senator McCaffrey and Rep. McNamara and say, slice of the pie for us. That's not how it works. Okay? And until the state is forced to do this, I don't know if we'll see significant changes in the funding formula, especially with the out-year projections on the state budget.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Superintendent, when did you start working for the city of Warwick? When did you start working for the city of Warwick?
I work for the Warwick School Committee in Warwick Schools.
I'm sorry?
I work in Warwick at the Warwick School Committee in the Warwick Schools.
No, but I asked you was, let me rephrase the question. How long have you been the superintendent of schools in Warwick?
October, I believe, 2015.
Of 2013?
15, I believe.
2015. So not quite 3 years, about two and a half years.
Correct.
Okay. So, some time ago, both you and Mr. Ferrucci and members of the school committee and the teachers' unions, you began negotiations on this contract. And it went on, as we all know. And then, miraculously, Mayor Avedisian says that he's going to sit in a meeting. And he has a meeting with you folks. And then we see the press release that all is well. We've resolved the problems. We basically agree. So at that time, on your side and on the administration side, you agreed on a number, correct?
In terms of the raises, yes.
In terms of the raises, that's correct. And in terms of the budget, at some point in time, I'm sure you had conversations with Mayor Avedisian, correct?
She created by law the fiscal impact statement for the 3 years of the contract.
So you folks knew, and the mayor from the previous administration knew, that there was about a $3.6 million increase coming down the road for salaries, correct?
In year one, that's correct.
Okay. So what do you think about, and I'm asking for your opinion, what do you think about the fact that after Mayor Avedisian sat in on the, can a CEO of a city sit in contract talks, know what is coming down the road, that's a given, the 3.6, that was a given, and say, you know what, we're just going to level fund you. Let the next administration deal with it. Because that's what happened. And now we're here to deal with it. And that's our job. And the council president, I thought he spoke very well in the beginning of the meeting. What will it take? And what you choose to do, sir, is you chose to draw. We're talking about you need 8 million more. I haven't been on this council as long as some of my other colleagues, but this is my 6th budget that I sit in. And this is almost like deja vu, because we go through this all the time. And you've heard me say this all the time. You come in, you tell us what you need, you tell us what you want, you make your demands, and then if you don't get it, the threats come. And this time, you really dig in, and you threaten us with a lawsuit predicated on the Carullo Act.
Previous year brought forward, so we had a balanced budget for the year, and we returned the money that we got, yes.
And in 2015,
I don't recollect, but someplace in
but
that
there was a
area.
surplus in that general vicinity.
Well, let's define surplus. Each year we had a balanced budget. Each year the previous year's surplus was brought forward, and each year we returned that surplus. So we were operating balanced budgets.
Here's what I call a surplus. I call a surplus anything more than you came to us in the budget hearings saying that you had and what you needed in addition. Then, a month or two after we do the budget hearings, you come back and you say, and by the way, you guys, you recalculate your budget, I think, 2 or 3 times a year. We only have the opportunity to do that once a year. So after doing this 2 or 3 times, you come back and you somehow always have this surplus. As a matter of fact, in 2016, you had a surplus of $3,185,454. And in 2017, you had a surplus of $1,218,671.
But to my point, in 2016 at $3.1 million, which we did agree to, we were very clear that the school committee had all expenses and committed one not get complete. So the only available funds that were remaining for anything operational on a non-structural deficit issue was $1.3 million. And those funds covered shortfalls with regards to breakage in the following year. And we've spoken to these issues. You're talking $1 million differential on a $162 million budget. You're talking less than half of 1% margin of error. I've been chastised in this chambers for having, well, my history here. When I presented this is not something that came out of as a surprise. We've spoken about this on a number of occasions throughout my career here.
We never spoke about an $8 million shortfall. If you don't give us this, then we're going to do that. And if we don't get...
I do need
Mr.
to put that...
Ferrucci,
Sorry, I need to put that in another context.
Say that again?
I need to put that...
Let's try and ask a question, or you want to make a statement, and then give the other person an opportunity to respond. And I realize that that the things that have been said in the past that are not, and that's fine. Mr. Ferrucci, I think
2018, as of May 1st, your budget was $162,238,442. That was what your budget was, correct? Call it $48 million. $47,909,608. So at May 1st, you still had $48 million in your budget. Explain to me how the school department is going to spend $48 million a month.
I believe if not financial reporting system and not the school department's report, is that correct?
It's the school report at the end of that budget. Yes, correct. At the end of that document.
From the school department or from city finance?
From the city.
Okay. City finance does not include purchase orders. So the current school department that goes to the school committee each month, and it does reflect encumbrances. Our encumbrances are somewhere in the neighborhood of 17, plus transportation, contract, and those kinds of things.
New fiscal year, are coming out of the budget for the current fiscal year?
Fiscal year runs for teacher salaries September 1st through June 30th.
Okay.
But they earn salary to get paid in the July and August timeframe. So rather than getting large payouts in June, our staff elect to have 26 biweekly pays. So I owe them money as of June 30th, and those encumbrances are recorded appropriately through the business office in conjunction with city finance, and the auditors validate those allocations on an annual basis.
So how is it that in, I believe, March, you said, that the school committee approved and adopted a budget of $166,123,617, and now you're saying you have an $8 million shortfall? Explain those to me.
I don't have an $8 million shortfall
you need
for
an
this year.
additional $8 million.
Next year, we need an $8 million.
Right.
The screen had broken that piece out. We have contractual commitments for salary for next year, which is added to that. We have step increases for that. Total cost increase needed for next year is $5.1 million. The balance is lost revenue.
So you're saying that the $166 million change is for this current fiscal year?
Through June 30th, 2018, that's correct.
Have you made a decision on your health care provider?
For the upcoming year, yes.
You have? And
yes, we have.
Who is that?
WB Health. We're working collaboratively with the City of Warwick and Cranston Schools. And that was at the recommendation of the consultant that was hired by City Finance. Or I understand maybe possibly through the City Council. I'm not sure who made the actual contract.
What you chose to do was to forego about $485,000 in savings by switching to United Health.
That was not validated in the report. I didn't bring the report with me, but the consultant stipulated, I believe on page 22 or 23, stating that in fact it was an immaterial and that it was more beneficial for both the city and the schools to stay with WB Health because those dollars could not be validated. From my opinion, when you start changing plan design without negotiating with your bargaining units, you don't know until you see the devil in the details. And so there's no guarantee whatever potential savings they were talking about. And I think the consultant recognized it. The school committee has seen success with this program and recognizes it. And so for the short, midterm, and long term, WB Health is the right program, and I think the city's benefited from it. And I concurred with the consultant's recommendation.
When you were negotiating the contracts, one of the issues that you've been hearing me talk about since I got here was about the 90 sick days. And as I understand it, I think the larger reason for the teachers with 90 sick days is because they don't get TDI, because they're not provided with TDI. I think that's one of the larger reasons. So the question is, did you bring that at all in negotiation?
Sure. In contract talks, we actually had an offer on the table. We had offered, I believe, 18 sick days, TDI. We also had a few more incentives in there. I can't recall off the top of my head, but essentially TDI was part of the conversation. At the end of the day, in the arbitration award, fair enough.
Okay. Provided by RIDE. 10,415 students. On their website, it was showing 9,124 for us. You clarified that tonight. I think you said 8,790. They also have about 1,022 teachers. We have 950-ish.
Next year it'll be, I believe, 856.
It'll be 956?
856.
856.
Actually, I think 854.
Okay. They have 23 schools, and you testified earlier that once you close the 3 schools that we have here now, or the proposed area closing, we're going to have 19 schools. Their budget, which, by the way, let me point out, is projected for 3 years, and it's fixed for 3 years. And their budget is $157,888,334. So with the significant variations between the numbers, how do you explain that difference?
The one big difference you'll see is Social Security. Warwick, we pay into it. Cranston does not. That's millions of dollars every year. Cranston's not paying into Social Security, and we do.
And Social Security would be borne half by the city and half by the employee. So it'd be a 7.15% of your payroll.
7.65% of the teachers' professional salaries, which is on our subschedule of $73 million, would be about $6.1 million in Social Security add to Cranston's.
Dollars are. But you said that our cost is $245,310 for transportation?
Approximately 2% of the contract, yes.
Is this something that you bid out, or is this just...
Yes, we do. We bid it out routinely. And for the last 2 times we bid it out, First Student's the only bus company that's provided a bid. Other bus companies have come in early on, and we're about 20 to 25% higher. The issue is the inventory of buses required in Warwick. So a company that doesn't have 75 to 80 buses to bring in has to go buy all brand new buses, and they need to be capture those costs within 5 years, which turns into an expensive proposition for a student. But yes, we do competitively is run and operated by First Student as well.
Some other numbers that I found interesting, given that the cities are comparable in size, and by the way, city now, because they factored in the population in the prisons in Cranston. The MIS director in Cranston, 94,300. The superintendent of schools in Cranston is 165,548. And I was kind of surprised to see the 3.1% of potentially $171 million going to supplies and materials. It is troubling, to say the least. When I see a comparable community running a larger school department for far less than we are, I mean, I think one of the questions would be, what are they doing different than we're doing? I know they're not going to their city council asking for $8 million. And that is extremely troubling to me. And Superintendent, with all due respect, your comment and your line in the sand of $8 million, after it was clearly presented to you, we can only go 6.6 million or somewheres thereabouts, is even more concerning. We have 3 contracts. We have many departments that need more. And this well is only so deep. We have departments that need equipment and vehicles, some more than others. And what you're doing is you're drawing the line in the sand, and you're saying, we're going to get, or we need to get, or we want to get, or we have to get $8 million. What about the rest of the people in this? Would be for yourselves and the school committee to get together and have a conversation about this and present something that is fair and equitable to everyone. And in that presentation for this councilman will also need to come a retraction and a guarantee that there will be no lawsuit. Because an aggressive offense is going to generate an aggressive defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Ricks.
Councilman Howe and Lattiser, and certainly all of my colleagues, Councilwoman Travis raised many excellent points. And as I look at this particular page, it's noted as page 1 of 6, professional management and administration, that Councilman Howe and Lattiser referred to earlier. Even after some of these explanations of exactly, well, maybe not exactly, what these various positions do, it seems to me that maybe there are some ways to save money here, because I'm familiar with the 72 pink slips that were handed out, and to my knowledge, please correct me if I'm wrong, none of those pink slips went to
One's the Common Core coach, one is the construction coordinator.
The public's going to have an opportunity to speak too.
Well, I'll try to make this quick. So it seems to me that we have a lot of really great opportunities here to find ways to consolidate the administration while working collaboratively with teachers. Some of these positions, I understand why they exist. You might not want a teacher being the person who reviews teaching applications and assessments. However, when we have a coordinator of coordinator of teaching and learning, director of assessment, instruction curriculum, third, chief academic officer, then we have director of elementary education and director of secondary education. Well, some of these positions, perhaps judging by the title, along the lines of director of assessment, instruction, curriculum, when it comes to designing the curriculum and having to obey all of those federal and state mandates, and granted, curriculum does not tend to change radically year to year, it seems to me that perhaps there's an opportunity here to bridge between the administration and having teachers, those who have 20, 25, 30 years in the system, those who have been promoted to department head, taking a lead in designing and maintaining the curriculum, especially when they have support of a director of elementary education and a director of secondary education and a chief academic officer. I'm not saying that any one of these positions is I'm saying that looking at those 72 pink slips versus overlap quite a bit, and a lot of functions that directly overlap with the superintendent. If somebody had come up to me on the street and said, "Who's the chief officer of Warwick Schools?" I would say, "The superintendent is the chief academic officer, isn't he?" Well, forgive my ignorance. But my point is that when we're living in these drastic times of these various functions where I'm seeing all of these 6-digit salaries, which is even more than the mayor makes, well, perhaps it's time for some shared sacrifice on the side of the administration, whether that be in salary cuts or whether that be in consolidating positions. And maybe that can help us get down to a more reachable number so that we can have the best possible education for the students. Thank you.
Councilwoman Travis.
Yes, Dr. Thornton, when you first came in, you were kind of analyzing a lot of 2010 figures. I thought it might be interesting to see the salary part, like as a pie chart. I always say top heavy, one of the things. Plus, I know we got a lot less students now, but I didn't know if you did anything like that.
We actually have an analysis we just did, not in the pie chart, but actually in what's called a daily per diem rate. As you know, some folks work year-round. Some folks work just the school year, 180 days. And we did the analysis to see what we're looking at for a daily rate. We actually break it down. For example, department head at a high school makes more per day than everyone except myself for a daily rate, because they work only the 180 plus days before and after school. So we actually have an analysis I can give you later on, tomorrow, of a breakdown by classification for their daily rate. Teacher, admin, director, superintendent, all that right through.
Okay, for now. But I mean, like, over the 10 years, I just thought it would be very interesting.
Thank you. Councilman Lattisaw.
Mr. Ferrucci, in the past, at least in a couple of years, you and I had conversations during this budget time about a particular line item that you had funded for $3.3 million of health care insurance, I believe you called it. I don't see that in this budget. Has that $3 million, do you carry it, feel a need to have it any longer?
Trying to recollect the conversation about the $3 million stop loss. Stop loss is an expense in the WB Health program. So the budget we're looking at this evening has a fixed premium that goes to WB Health, and then out of that premium, claims that come in from doctors get paid, administrative fee to Blue Cross administer the program, and then the stop loss piece for the insurance. So that's at the WB level. If you're referring to the surplus that helps stabilize our program, which is what was carried, which is a fund balance, after the claims are all paid and all the expenses are paid, there was fund balance on our behalf at WB, which ran around $3 million. If that's what you're referring to, or stop loss
No, that's not what I'm referring to.
I don't remember. Correct.
And today, I no longer see that $3 million in the budget. And maybe I missed it. Perhaps I missed that.
The $3 million has never been in this budget, Mr. Latter, sir. It had to be during our conversation.
No, that was in writing, sir. It was in your budget presentation to this city council, and we went at it at least 2 years in a row. So it was in your budget. And I had your 3 years of tax returns. So it was there.
I don't understand what you mean by tax returns.
Your filings. Your filings showed that you had, or the city, the school department was paying $3 million a year for stop loss coverage.
I will be more than happy to review the WB Health financial reports, and I will share them with you and the rest of the city council through the president, and maybe we get clarity as to what report you're specifically speaking to, and then we can go from there. I'd be happy to do that.
People thought to be, that is something that we need to work together to talk about in the future. We're sitting here trying to come up with a budget that has to be done within the next 3 or 4 days. So looking to the state for the fix on that is not going to happen. What is going to happen is that we have to be able to find a budget that we can propose and that the taxpayers are going to support. I notice in the documents that you submit to us, you talk about a community support request. That makes it sound like the community is seeking to support this request. What it really is, it is our attempt to have the taxpayers support this by being the ones that are going to bear the bill, and they are. The taxpayers are the ones that are going to bear the bill. And I believe that perhaps if we were to elevate the level of our conversation and we were to be able to cooperate in the way that was mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, we could present a picture for the taxpayers that I believe want to support education. I want to support education. I want to drive on roads that don't rattle my car every time I go anywhere in this city, as does every other taxpayer. There are lots of things that the people in Warwick will be willing to support. I do not believe that they really want to get into the middle of a long, drawn-out battle between two different parts of the city government, the schools and the city council and the city side of the administration. I don't know that how many people in Warwick know that and you have your own accounting system, because I understand the Department of Education mandates that you follow the accounting system that the school department has, and the city side of government has a different accounting system. That is something we need to work on in the future, because we can't have one side of our government that is approximately, both sides should understand. And we are not multilingual when it comes to our finances. They're just numbers. So I understand that, Mr. Ferrucci, you have all of your numbers and that's your system. I may agree with many comments that have been said that the administration may be top-heavy, but a lot of those things are items that need to be discussed in the future. What needs to be done this week is for us to be able to adopt a budget. I understand, looking at the numbers, that we were told tonight by the superintendent that next year Warwick's going to have 854 teachers. Did I get that number right?
Yes, sir.
And the 854 teachers, I assume that is a number that you came to with all of the layoff notices that have
maybe reduction. For example, we have other areas that have been given layoff notices, so the school committee has to make a tough decision and think about.
I don't know if the implied message by that is that the only way that you'll be able to find a way to adjust your numbers is to lay off more teachers. But it is not a pleasant thought, and it is not something that, being on the city council, no one likes to try to adopt a budget if they feel like they have a gun to their head. And I understand the superintendent's answer when asked, what is it that you're looking for? And he says $8.1 million. It's not going to do any good for the city of Warwick, I know that. I know it's going to just bring that. The city is working to move in as that generation moves on, are going to be younger people. And everything's cyclical. You can't look at everything as a snapshot. It evolves over time. But one thing that has not evolved in a positive way is communication within the city. We talk about it a little bit, but both sides have not done enough to foster that. And I believe the people that have put us in this position want us to do that, and that is something that needs to be done. But we do have our short-term assignment, and our short-term assignment is to come up with a budget. In going through these items, there are some things that I just disagree with. I don't think that the transportation costs of moving sixth graders and closing the 3 elementary schools is going to approach $1 million. That's my personal opinion. I've heard what Mr. Ferrucci has said, and I think that that is something that is not required. I don't really understand the school committee's adding of $670,000 because they said that they should add to the superintendent's record. I don't understand a lot of the figures that are contained on your expense summary because there are things that may have to be sacrificed rather than laying off more teachers to balance the budget. Perhaps some of these other items are things that are perhaps not as necessary as being able to put 854 teachers to take our students into the schools next year. So that all of these items, in my mind, are subject to negotiation. If the school administration want to discuss that, I think that the council would be happy to hear it. And I would like to see us have a conversation and not an argument, and be able to do it in a way that is not offensive to either party. You have your role, we have ours, and one thing both of those roles should be.
Yes, Superintendent, could you give me your definition of level of effort?
Could you say more about that in terms of what? Baseline for the following year. And it had strict ratios, things like for every 1,000 students you have 1 librarian. Around 2009, RIDE redid it, made it about yay thick, and now they took out the strict quotas, if you will.
Ask questions. If there are any members of the public that have questions, please step up to the mic.
Good evening. Stacia Heiler, Ward 9. I have a few questions, please, just for clarification purposes. Sure. For either Superintendent Thornton or Mr. Ferrucci, you said we have 854 teachers, and what was the total amount of students that we have? And then my second question is, what is adequate and sufficient when it comes to the teacher-student ratio? So what do we need right now for the number of teachers? What do we need to maintain for teachers to match the number of students that we currently have? That's my
Your first question, I understood the teacher number for next year is 854. You also wanted to know, I'm sorry? Students right now, next year, I believe we forecast, I said 8797, I believe. In terms of your other question, what's adequate and sufficient for staffing? That depends on what kind of class we're talking about. Is it an honors history class? Then maybe 10 or 12 is your number. Is it a freshman English class? Maybe 24, 25 is your number. Is it a grade 3 classroom? Maybe it's 23, 24. It really depends on what we're talking about. But right now, we believe 854 is the adequate number, provided that, I mentioned earlier to Mr. McAllister, we're watching 5 classrooms right now that may pop, I use the word pop, and get larger, and then I'll have to add 5 more teachers this summer. So that could happen this summer.
Okay, so what I don't know if even if Superintendent Thornton can answer this question. So the previous mayor, Mayor Avedisian, when he was negotiating the new teacher contract, so getting back to, I just wanted to touch the truth, when the public sees teachers calling out sick, taking sick outs and making kids miss school, and parents have to worry about if their kids are going to school, you see that process unfold to get their way, okay? And then you see these closed-door negotiations go on, and then all of a sudden, voila, we have, we're looking at 5.1 million, first it's 3 million, and then you look at retro pay, the teachers weren't getting pay for a few years, and now we're making up for all of this, I guess, disagreement that's been going on between the previous administration and today. And now we can't afford it. And we all knew that we've been talking about this for many years, that this day would come, and it's here. And we are also looking at, so taxpayers of Warwick have been paying 20 straight years of tax increases. The only reason why we didn't have a tax increase last year is because the city council made that happen with cuts. That's the only reason why that happened. So now we hear this conversation of, well, what do you need? Well, we need $8 million. That's what we need. And we're not even on to Cranston. Okay? That's the difference between an actual conservative mayor in Cranston and a wannabe, I'm sorry, I have to say it, somebody that ran as a Republican that wasn't really conservative in Warwick for 20 years. That's the difference between Cranston and Warwick, in my opinion. So I'm not even sure.
If I knew it was going to happen, I might buy a lottery ticket and solve everybody's problem, but I don't know what would happen in court. And I'm an attorney. We can guess, but we don't know what would happen. And it's not an enviable position to be in, and I certainly concur with your thought process about where we are.
Because I'm here. I know a lot of people like to show up here when they want something, but no one is coming to these city council meetings, every single city council meeting, and is dedicated and listens to what is going on in the city, because it's just my personal opinion. People only really care about themselves. That's the bottom line. It's unfortunate, okay? We're talking about really caring about children. Try showing up to a meeting when you don't want something. And I'm sorry, it's hard not to get upset. It's because you watch it, I watch it closely, and it's hard not to just get very frustrated watching this all unfold and trying to figure out whether or not my husband and I want to stay in the city. I think about how am I going to take care of my senior parents that live over in Connecticut Point who rely on me as they age. This affects a lot of people's lives. Okay, you can't just say, if you don't like it, move. That's the easy cop-out answer. This affects people's lives like you do not even understand. I don't think a lot of people understand it because they think money grows on trees. That's really what some people think, and it's really truly unfortunate. So my next question is, so I believe it was 71 teachers got, is that right? 71 teachers got pink slips. So how does this work? We have 3 schools closing down, the elementary schools, and then what happens? You bring certain teachers back again for the next school year, and how many?
So, I think the superintendent and some of the school committee members touched on this. Eventually, a budget is going to be passed by the city, and then we can only give them the money. We can't tell them how to spend it. So at the appropriate time, they would go back and make those decisions as they've made in previous years.
Which would have to come with layoffs. If they don't get what they need, unfortunately,
I'm sure they have a lot of choices.
Because I certainly cannot remember the last time we had layoffs on the city side of business. I don't think we ever have. I don't. You all
Yes.
have been here a lot longer.
Yep.
So you see that. You see the population decreasing. We can see that we used to have over 20,000 students. Now we're under 9. We just lost another 175 in 1 year. And don't say that's from the airport acquiring properties, okay? Because we've been seeing this trend going on for quite a long period of time. And it's not just airport property acquirement, it's really people just packing up and leaving, or you have an aging population, and unfortunately more families are not wanting to move back into Warwick. It's not inviting to come here. I've seen it in my own neighborhood, 3 homes sold. My next door neighbors are a couple from California. The neighbors diagonally across the street from me, their kids are enrolled in private school. They don't go to Warwick Public School. And the couple down the street is from Texas. That's where they're from. They have no children. That's what I see moving into my neighborhood, and that concerns me too. Because people aren't, you look at Division Road, when properties go up for sale on the border of East Greenwich and Warwick, the for sale signs say, you know, not Warwick Public Schools, East Greenwich Public Schools. They actually are specifically putting that on the for sale sign, okay? Because it's more inviting. They, you know, just so you know, it's not Warwick Schools, it's East Greenwich, and that's sad to see that. So, so if we're going to really, you know, buckle down and really pick this school budget apart, we have to do the same thing with the city side of the budget. You have to do the same thing with the fire department and the municipal department. Okay, they require the same amount of scrutiny, for sure. I hope to see the same types of questions being asked by those departments when we're talking about what's adequate and sufficient. We know that there's a lot of inadequacies going on in other departments. So that's it. I mean, we're all tired. I appreciate the time and thank you, but I just think it's really sad that we're in this situation, and we know
for at least another 5 years. That's why I'm here. So I just have a couple of random comments quickly that I get out. I understand the difference between the maximum tax increase and what Dr. Thornton is asking for. And I understand why you all asked him to come back with his lowest number, hoping it would be lower than the 8.1 that he was asking for. But, you know, you also mentioned how it was of the previous administration to say that the teachers could get the raise, but so I understand why you asked him to reevaluate his number, but to ask him to do it in looking at the contractual increases. So I do see that. You know, someone brought up Gorton and the administration remodel. Again, you know, I understand that that's kind of a thorn in the side, but how many times can we rehash that? And I just don't think it's productive conversation at this point to keep bringing that up. At that point, you just have to move on and go forward. Looking at the administration consolidation, which would not affect students, I think that the conversation about making cuts to the school budget that doesn't affect the students directly, someone over here on that side said that, and I liked when I heard that. And then I hear about the potential of a lawsuit. And so I vaguely recall seeing an ad about that, and my first thought was, you gotta be kidding me. We just came out of 3 years of battle over the teacher's contract. The city cannot go through, the parents, the rest of the whole city cannot go through another lawsuit. You all have to do what you have to do so that does not happen. The students can't handle it, the parents can't handle it, and everyone in between.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here to speak on the school department budget?
Island. And I gave it to every council member, every House of Representative, every senator, urging and begging. I used the word begging at that time. And in my handout, because it was so unfair, the monies that we were getting from the state, and it hasn't stopped yet. 5 years ago, when Cranston and Warwick was at the same amount of money at 32.5, and now to see Cranston at over 60 and Warwick down to 36 shows you what has happened. But we have 3 intelligent workers up there at the State House for us at the present time. Representative McNamara, Representative Sakachi, and Senator McCaffrey. We have top 3 there working for the city of Warwick. But they have been unable to stop the reduction in the amount of money we get. When you look at that budget coming from the state and all of the amount that you mentioned, 160 million, something like that, that the state gives, when the city of Providence $60 million for their school system. When the city of Pawtucket gets 80-something million dollars, when the city of Central Falls gets 40 million and they don't pay a penny for schools in the city of Central Falls. Our taxpayers in Warwick pay $3 million towards their school. When Socket at almost 60 million. And here we are at 37. That's the unfairness. And nothing can change up at that State House, as far as I can see in all of these years. It just is not possible. I've been up there testifying time and again to please do something for the city of Warwick. And I haven't been successful, and it's one of my regrets. In 2006, to make changes, it says this: the city shall annually appropriate a sum sufficient to pay the principal and interest coming due. That hasn't happened in Warwick. The city, the school department here in the city of Warwick pays the principal and interest. There are 14,000 school districts in the country. 14,000, not one of them of those school departments pay principal and interest to a bond issue issued by the cities in town. Not one. That right now is in that part over there, where you see the salary and benefits totaling nearly 86% of our budget. That $8 million that was asked is going to come out of that figures over there. But it totals out of that, we're paying $1,750,000 a year, principal and interest. The school department is going to be paying $30 million. $30 million out of our own money to do everything else in the schools and bring them up to shape. State of Rhode Island says, City of Warwick, you need $196 million to bring your schools into shape. So we made up a bond issue of $85 million because that was a 5-year plan for each of our schools that would bring them up at least in good service for another 20 years. That was reduced to $40 million, and if the taxpayers in Warwick approve it in next November's election, then we'll have that to repair and rehabilitate. Then, years after, we'll have to go after the other $45 million, but that certainly is the cost of construction and repairs is certainly going to exceed that amount. So my point is, we have tried to do the best. We have worked hard hours on the school committee to do the right thing. And I think we have. So I just want to leave that, Mr. President, that, you know, we haven't received a pay increase in 64 years. The 4,000 in 63 is the same as in 2018, but we're not in it for the money, we're in it to help our beautiful students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Dave Testa, school committee member, board president, parent of kids in the schools. I'll be very brief because it's late. First, I just want to address the issue of the former mayor being involved in the contract discussions and that somehow he crafted this deal. I sat in on those discussions for the better part of 3 or 4 months. I took personal vacation time to sit in on those sessions. He didn't craft anything. Okay? Frankly, it's an insult to the people on both sides of the table who were working this deal out. This deal was mediated, and then we had put proposals up there. The union rejected them. They put some up. We rejected them. Then it went to arbitration. It was an arbitrator's decision that was the retro piece. Our position wasn't for retro. Never was. Never was. But the arbitrator's ruling was binding on us. It didn't bind us on the financials. We could have thrown that out if we wanted to, but that wouldn't have been fair. But I think to try to create some sort of a narrative that it's a byproduct of him is just wrong. As far as tax rates in Warwick and comparisons to Cranston, I grew up in Cranston. Most of my family still lives in Cranston. Cranston's property tax rate is 13% higher than Warwick's. City services are virtually identical. So when I hear about our taxes are way too high, well, I don't know, everything's relative. Okay, you can go to North Kingstown and pay a much lower property tax rate on a higher assessed house, but you don't get trash pickup. So again, everything is relative. Sticking on a Cranston theme, the differences between the two school systems is number one, the FICA tax. Number two, the teacher steps are lower than ours. Number three, we run more buses than they do. Okay, so I did that analysis, and you run that all together. The net difference between us and Cranston is about $2.5 to $3 million. That's it. Okay, and Cranston has their own buses. Okay, I don't think schools should be in the transportation business. So that's capital expenditures. That's a whole bunch of other stuff that just about every other district has gotten out of, and I think for a good reason. Next to last point is we can't ignore the history of the funding. And I think, Council President, you kind of referenced to it at the beginning of the meeting, where historically the schools have been in a tough jam. But we can't forget that in 2009, when the General Assembly said to cities and towns, you can cut your maintenance of effort 5%. We did. We were the only district to do that. We cut the full 5%. Increased 20%, teaching positions have decreased 20%. But if you look at the numbers, the total admin positions over 25 years increase was 6. It's the law of big numbers. Okay, so again, we have to be careful with what percentages say. We've got to look at what's behind those numbers as well. So the last thing, I hear about this exodus of people from Warwick, and yet every time real estate figures come out and home sales come out, there's not enough homes to be sold. And almost every home that's up for sale gets sold. And the reason why the houses on Division Road, the for sale signs that advertise these accredited schools, is because their schools have better results than ours. And that's what we need to be focusing on. If we increase the results, people will come. If they feel their schools are good. Last thing about Cranston, look at Cranston schools, they're on par with Warwick. You look at the state averages, we flip-flop. So their schools are no better than ours, or ours are no better than theirs. Okay? We like to believe our schools are. My kids have gotten fantastic educations here. Fantastic educations. So focus on results, improving the results, and people will come. But people who move in, they may have 1 child or 2, tops. Okay, the days of 3, 4, and 5 kids are gone. It's just simple demographics. And maybe, Councilman Corley, we might have a large population of 65 and older. With life expectancy.
Third time I've been to a budget meeting, we would do that at Tollgate. They need central air. They're telling you the truth. It's hot, okay? My son is there. The rooms, there's an inside room. We were commenting on it today. Okay? So when they come to you and they say, we need millions of dollars to provide central air at XYZ school, Tollgate for instance, they're telling you the truth. My big thing is, as a coach, I would like to see field turf at Tollgate High School. I would like to see field turf at Pilgrim High School. Okay? One of the things that I was amazed at about Tollgate is that how all the students, athletes, seem to have to travel to many different places. I'm the field hockey coach at Tollgate. Mr. McAllister, do you know where the Tollgate field hockey team plays?
CCRI?
No, I know you know. I asked Mr. McAllister.
Because that's where my sister played in the 1970s.
In the 1970s.
That's what, at Tollgate.
At Tollgate, that's right. And I have made this.
And Mr. McAllister and I went to Tollgate. We didn't have air conditioning. I remember that too.
At CCRI, right? And I've been told that's how it's always been done. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how it's been done like that as long as it's been done. I have lived in Warwick since 1972. I'm a proud graduate of Warwick Vets, and I am amazed that that has been happening since 1972. Okay? My daughter is in the 6th grade. Okay? She plays soccer, right? The soccer team has to go and practice sometimes at City Park. So, as a 9th grader, that is going to require my daughter, and this blows my mind, it happens on Family ID, and I have to sign off on it so she can play soccer, my daughter will have to get in an upperclassman's car and drive to City Park. That makes, the safety of that is incredible. The lawsuit that the city of Warwick has, miraculously has not happened. It blows my mind that this has been happening since 1972, and we have allowed it to happen. So I'm telling you, there's a need for it, okay? When they tell you they need things, there's a need for it. When they say the school's hot, it is hot. When they say that they need field turf at the schools, they need field turf at the schools, okay? I understand you have a fiduciary responsibility to me, the taxpayer. I understand that. I'm telling you, as a taxpayer of the city of Warwick, we need to spend more money to upgrade the facilities. We need to spend more money. This half $40 million, are you serious? Mr. Nato just said, what was it, 100 and, no one in the city of Warwick or future residents of the city of Warwick drive by a fire station and go, wow, that's a nice fire station. What they do though is they drive up to the school, they look at the facility, and they're like, wow, that's a nice facility, okay? That's a nice athletic complex. The school has AC, right? These are things that we need. So I'm telling you that when Dr. Thornton or the next superintendent gets up here and says, we need these things, I want you to remember me. Because we do need these things. We need to upgrade the facilities in Warwick schools. We need to pass a bond that upgrades the facilities at Warwick schools, right? You guys all seem to be kind of on the same page, but we need to get moving, all right? I can be honest with you, to play sports. We need a major upgrade there. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you didn't ding me.
And I was just going to say,
I talk forever.
I sponsored the bond referendum in 2006,
Thank you.
and it was $26 million, which included a lot of upgrades to the fields up there. And as Mr. Nato said, we had a station nightclub fire, and all these requirements came down from the state of Rhode Island. And I think Gene mentioned $10 million that we had earmarked to go towards Tollgate and the other facilities went elsewhere as a state mandate. The second issue that you talk about is, why didn't we pass 85 compared to the 40 that we passed? What I can tell you is administrations have come and gone, as the superintendent wasn't here back then when we were putting bond referendums in. But I can tell you that the forecasts that previous school departments have put out were inaccurate. So let me give you an example. Potawatomi, we built an all-purpose room. We got rid of asbestos. That was the 4th highest scoring elementary school in the state of Rhode Island. And 3 or 4 years later, it was gone. So to this day, we're paying principal and interest on a building that doesn't exist. So as a person that's seen waste, and that's one, go look at the other elementary schools that we added all-purpose rooms on that are closing, that we're paying principal and interest on. It wasn't Dr. Thornton's fault. It was previous administrations in the school department. But, to guess that those administrations didn't look at it properly. So as far as I'm concerned, I gave the money. I looked at that, but it's not fair that they closed those schools and that money didn't go into buildings or facilities at the football field. I mean, Bethany was the statistician at Tollgate when I was the quarterback. And before we had a football field in 1983, 1982, we used to take, when you have a football field there, maybe that's your soccer field, since they're going to move the football field. Boosters Club raise up so you could have games at night. Right, Bethany?
Point to that I understand what you're saying, but they have closed school. I'm pretty sure we can plan out 5-10 years now that Tollgate High School will be open.
Right.
Correct?
And the testimony, just so you know, the testimony that Dr. Thornton gave said that it would be 4 to 5 years before they could spend the 80. We gave them 40. Come back and show us you're doing the right thing so history doesn't repeat itself. That's why we split it up. If we gave you the 80, it wouldn't have made a difference because he wouldn't have spent it over 5 years. I see like people like you coming before me and saying, where did the money go? Because I know where it went last time, and it was misappropriated to buildings that we closed and knocked down. I don't want to see that happen again. I want to have my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the school department, and that's why this council took that action. But I appreciate your question. I hope I educated you a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
If they're going to pay or not, and that's how it worked in Rhode Island, and Cranston opted out.
And then my second question was, what was the reasoning behind not going to the TDI program instead of the 90-day sick day?
In our process, our petition process, our proposal was that. It was, I believe, 18 sick days, TDI, a few more pieces. The arbiter took our position in the union and went with the 90. It was his ruling that was binding. You didn't want to keep their current practice. We offered the opposite, not opposite, a different one with TDI. On that one it was binding, so he bound us and took the 90.
So I think that we can clarify that one of the reasons why there's so much distrust between the whole system is this kind of thing where we don't have any say in any of this. The union goes into these closed-door meetings and they make all these decisions, and we as taxpayers essentially have no choice. And I guess, okay, we have an arbitrator, but who is this arbitrator working for? Are they working for the taxpayers? Because it doesn't seem like it ever works in the favor of the taxpayers. It seems like it always works in favor of the union. It's a very frustrating process, and I think we might need to look at how that works, because that seems to be a very frustrating process. Unfortunately, the reality is that these systems, whether it's the school, the fire department, all of these things are based on taxpayer money. It's the way that it is. It's reality. It stinks. Everybody wants to get paid what they're worth. We all do. I mean, I fight with it in nursing. We all deserve to get paid much more than we do, but we're at mercy of state funding as well. We deal with the same issue, and it's frustrating because I would love to pay everybody in the city what they deserve. But that's not reality. The reality is we have to work within the confines of what we have for taxpayer money. So I think it's important that everybody keep that in mind when we come to the table. It's frustrating, and people are going to have to make some concessions, and it's sad, but it is the way it is.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Scott Phillips. I'm from Ward 1, and I just wanted to come up and say that I've heard a lot about, oh, it's for the kids and we care about education, and I think it's a lot of lip service, to be honest. Like, there are some new people in here, but a lot of you have all been in these chairs as the schools have deteriorated over the years, and I've been in Warwick. I don't really completely trust the schools, so I get your point, but I don't really trust the city either, because as years have gone on, the city spent more on their side, and schools have gotten the same. You talk about the debt service that they're wasting, you mean the debt service they're paying on your buildings, right? City don't own the buildings. Why are they paying that? So I think that it's behind the debt service that they're paying. Maybe we should give that back to the city, and that'll help them knock down the 8.1. Why don't we have 80 million instead of 40? If you don't trust them, give them the 80 million and just hold the money until they make a good case for it. So the kids don't get that 40 million because you don't trust them.
No, I didn't say that. I said that the testimony was that it would take them, they have to release so much each year.
Yep.
And the bond referendums get passed every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's insignificant whether they have the 80 now, because they wouldn't be able to release it anyway. So what we're saying is they're going to come back in 2 years and give us a report as to what's going on, what's changed, if they're closing any other buildings. So we're not in a situation where we put all-purpose rooms on buildings that we close.
Councilman is saying it's cyclical, so that would mean more people were coming in, if that's the way you look. They're not doing anything. And we don't even know why. We haven't heard back what's going on with that. We know nothing. So when I see groups audit budgets on here that are $1 million over in salary and overtime, hopefully you'll land-base them the same way. When I see budgets that went up there today that have actuals of $700,000 last year and this year, but their budgets are $900 every year, no one asks why. I think communication needs to be better, but I also think the city side needs to be held to the same standards as the schools, and they're not.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't think we have any other speakers. I know that we have to make a motion to continue till tomorrow night at 5 p.m. So I have a motion to continue tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Councilman Lattiser? Seconded by Councilman Howe. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? We stand adjourned until 5 p.m. tomorrow.